You're listening to Quantum Harry the Podcast, a podcast version of the book Quantum Harry, A Unified Theory of the Potterverse by B.L. Purdom. Episode 35, Prisoner of Time. This is the beginning of a 2-episode arc examining tarot symbolism in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Last time we finished a 2-episode arc examining the cards in the Tarot Major Arcana whose symbolism can help to illuminate J.K. Rowling's narrative choices in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So if you missed episode 33, 34, or any of the tarot episodes, which began with episode 30, you should go back. And of course, if you're jumping into this here without having heard any previous episodes, you should definitely go back to the beginning, because all of the information in Quantum Harry the Podcast builds on everything that's come before. For instance, previous episodes that have a particular bearing on this 2-episode arc are episode 4, Mother May I, about the ruling archetype for Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and episodes 15 and 16, which are about the role of toys, sweets, and games, particularly Quidditch, in Prisoner of Azkaban. I'll be referring to all of these episodes throughout this one and the next. Anytime you want to listen or re-listen to any episode, just go to the Quantum Harry Twitter page, @QHPodcast, and click on the link in the pinned tweet to go to the Quantum Harry episode guide, which is links to all of the episodes in audio and video formats, plus links to blog posts related to some of the episodes. There are also images of the tarot cards on the Quantum Harry blog, my Instagram account, the Quantum Harry Pinterest board, and the Quantum Harry Facebook group. And when the video version of this episode is posted on YouTube, you'll be able to see all of the images I'm talking about in the video. This time we'll start by examining the column cards linked to the 3rd book in the Harry Potter series. In Alfonso Cuarón's cinematic interpretation of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, time is a recurring theme. This extends to the visual joke of a wizard at the pub called the Leaky Cauldron reading a copy of A Brief History of Time by the Muggle Stephen Hawking. There are numerous lingering shots of clocks in the film, large and small, and the Whomping Willow's progress through the seasons is also used by Cuarón to illustrate the passage of time. Unlike many film versions of the books, this manner of shaping the story is perfectly in tune with the book, since J.K. Rowling shaped the story around a complete Quidditch season, the only one Harry plays in the 7-book series, as I talked about in episodes 15 and 16. Using Quidditch to mark time prepares readers for the time travel sequence at the book's climax. Rowling chose to use a game, not the Whomping Willow as Cuarón does, and her choice is obviously going to be more in tune with the overarching theme running throughout her 7 books, as I talked about in episode 1, The Kids' Table. But time is still of the essence in the 3rd Harry Potter book, as the tarot card at the top of the 3rd column shows us. The 3rd column of cards in our tarot grid of 3 rows and 7 columns, the column that aligns with Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, has card number 3, the Empress, at the top, the Wheel of Fortune, card number 10, in the center, and the Star, card number 17, at the bottom of the column. In episode 4, Mother May I talked about Hermione Granger being the character who best embodies the mother, the ruling archetype for the 3rd book. She also happens to be the character who best embodies the Empress in Prisoner of Azkaban, which is the tarot equivalent of the archetypal mother, since Hermione's actions drive much of the book and she is a key player during the climactic time travel sequence. As a young woman now, Hermione is subject to time in a way that Harry and Ron are not, her monthly cycles. As a werewolf, Remus Lupin, who is introduced in Prisoner of Azkaban, also has a monthly cycle of sorts, though his is slightly different, and ideally, when he's taken the Wolfsbane potion brewed by Severus Snape, it involves less blood. A typical Empress card depicts a matronly woman sitting on a throne. There may be a shield in the shape of a large heart by her side, with the symbol for woman, a circle with a cross descending, or she may hold a shield with an eagle on it, which matches the shield seen on the card of her counterpart, the Emperor. In Hermione's case, this is another link to her almost being sorted into Ravenclaw, and this version of the Empress also usually wears a blue tunic. Blue is both Hermione's emblematic color, as I talk about in episode 7, Fountain of Youth, and the chief color of Ravenclaw House, as well as traditionally being associated with Mary, the mother of Jesus. Some versions of the Empress card show her with a crown of 12 stars for the months of the year, over which she rules, linking her to monthly cycles and to time. If her throne does not resemble the wings of an angel, it may be in a field backed by a stand of trees, linking her to nature and growing things. And let's remember, in the first book, Hermione is the one who had the knowledge needed to conquer the plant called Devil's Snare because she paid attention in herbology. The Empress card is linked to the Virgin Mary, Queen of Heaven, another meaning for the crown of stars, and to the astrological sign of Virgo, which is Hermione's birth sign, since her birthday is the 19th of September. The Empress is also linked to the Greek goddess of the harvest, Demeter. Many versions show a field of wheat growing at the Empress's feet. She's also linked to the goddesses Venus and Aphrodite, and therefore to love, which makes sense due to the heart-shaped shield and the symbol for woman on it. The Empress card is linked to Isis as well, who is the Egyptian goddess of the dog star, which is where Sirius, who's also introduced in this book, gets his name. The Empress both gives and takes. She gives fecundity/fertility, but she also withholds, such as when the goddess Demeter withheld spring while her daughter Persephone was in the underworld with Hades. Hermione keeps information from both Ron and Harry, the fact that Lupin is a werewolf, which is partly payback for their snubbing her after she has Professor McGonagall confiscate Harry's new broom, the firebolt that Sirius sends to him. She credits Snape assigning the third-year Gryffindors an essay about werewolves when he's their defense against the dark arts substitute teacher, but it's logical that Hermione, who's attuned to her own monthly cycle, should work out Lupin's secret even without this, a secret that flies over Harry's and Ron's heads. The links between the Empress, the goddess Isis, and the dog star are also fitting for the book in which Sirius Black is the title character, other than Harry. Hermione becomes a literal mother in this book, rather than just an archetypal or figurative one, by adopting Crookshanks the cat, who becomes the bane of existence for Scabbers, Ron's pet rat. She's protective of Crookshanks, and for a little while she's no longer friends with Ron when he believes that her pet ate his. She also researches legal cases in hopes of saving Buckbeak the Hippogriff, who's in danger of being executed in this book. A hippogriff combines an eagle, depicted on the Empress's shield on some cards, and a horse, which is an animal linked to the Empress's element, earth. This legal activity could also foreshadow Hermione's eventual career in magical law, which is hinted at in Deathly Hallows. The cards linked to the Empress, card number 3, are the Hanged Man, card number 12, because 1 + 2 = 3, and the World, card number 21, because 2 + 1 also equals 3. The Hanged Man is called the Traitor, or Il Traditore, in Italian tarot decks, in which the figure was sometimes pictured with a bag of money, quote, suggesting Judas with his 30 pieces of silver, unquote, according to Sally Nichols, in her book Jung and Tarot, An Archetypal Journey. The card shows a man being hung upside down by 1 foot. This practice was called baffling, and it was reserved for traitors, as I talked about in episode 30, Harry and Tarot. This card could point to the character of Sirius Black, who Harry believes betrayed him and his parents. He hears about this while eavesdropping on a conversation between Hagrid, Professor McGonagall, Professor Flitwick, and Madame Rosmerta at the Three Broomsticks. But this card could also point to the real traitor, Wormtail, Peter Pettigrew, the true identity of Ron's pet rat Scabbers. Sirius and Peter swap places by the end of the book, after the reader becomes aware that there's more to this rat than meets the eye, and that Sirius was framed for both the betrayal of the Potters and for Peter's so-called murder. Ron and Harry also feel deeply that Hermione has betrayed Harry by telling McGonagall about Harry receiving a new broomstick, sent to him anonymously. and Hermione embodies the Empress, whose card is numerically linked to the Hanged Man. The Hanged Man isn't a card in the tarot story that is definitively always linked to betrayal, though. Nichols cites the Apostle Peter, who shares a name with Peter Pettigrew, being crucified upside down as a, quote, mark of humility. She also writes, as history has repeatedly shown, any person whose individual conscience is in opposition to the collective viewpoint can appear as a traitor to the establishment. Such an individual is subjected to many trials, the least of which is that held in a court of law. Often upside down in relation to his friends, his family, and his government, such a nonconformer can even be branded criminal. We will see this with Harry's character in the 5th book, Order of the Phoenix, in which he is in fact considered to be a traitor to the establishment, the Ministry of Magic. The 5th book will be ruled by the 5th column of tarot cards, in which the Hanged Man is the center card, between the 5th card, the Pope or Hierophant or High Priest, and the 19th card, the Sun. But this is another way that Sirius can be seen as the Hanged Man in the 3rd book. He is not an actual traitor, but is in opposition to the establishment, and has been branded a criminal because of this, not because he actually did what he was accused of. Harry is also briefly in this role in the 3rd book. His aunt and uncle tell Aunt Marge that he goes to St. Brutus's Secure Center for Incurably Criminal Boys, that he's in juvie, basically. As if fulfilling this prophecy of his criminal tendencies, he accidentally inflates Aunt Marge and immediately decides to go on the lam, fleeing with his broomstick and his trunk of magical books and other school supplies, intent on becoming a fugitive rather than have his wand broken or suffering whatever punishment Vernon wants to inflict on him after this incident. Harry also breaks the school rule about not being able to go to Hogsmeade without having his permission slip signed. He's been a rule breaker before, but does it far more often and with less trepidation in the 3rd book, in which Snape also cites Harry's father James as someone who repeatedly broke rules. This rule-breaking culminates in Harry actually helping a prisoner of the Ministry, Sirius, to escape, as well as helping the condemned Buckbeak, another Hanged Man who was not actually guilty of the crime for which he was convicted and sentenced to death. The World card, number 21, the other card linked numerically to card number 3, the Empress, is about completion and wholeness. The figure on it holds 2 wands and is surrounded by symbols of the evangelists, which, as I mentioned in the earlier tarot episodes, align with fire, air, water, and earth. And this also links the card to the suits of the tarot minor arcana and to the Hogwarts houses, which are also each aligned with fire, air, water, or earth. In this book, Harry masters conjuring a Patronus. To do this, he must think happy thoughts, and the ones he chooses are revealing. Hagrid telling him that he's a wizard when Harry learns the truth about himself and feels complete and whole because of this. He also thinks about being with his best friends, Ron and Hermione, who make him feel complete and whole as well. After he wins the Quidditch Cup, he experiences a euphoria that he believes could help him to conjure the world's best Patronus, but he doesn't actually use this thought to later conjure the Patronus that will save him, Hermione, and Sirius from an army of Dementors. However, as I talked about in episodes 15 and 16, Harry comes to equate his Quidditch training with this skill, with conjuring a Patronus. He first goes to Lupin to ask for help fighting Dementors in order to succeed at Quidditch, after Dementors make him fall from his broom during the first match of the year. Since Harry's first match ever, when he collided with and became metaphorically entangled with all snitches, Quidditch has been an activity of wholeness and completion for him, and catching the snitch is like Harry reuniting with a missing piece of himself. When he first sees a figure conjuring a Patronus to save him, Hermione, and Sirius from the Dementors, he believes he's seeing his dead father, James. While he's time-traveling, he realizes that he has to be the one to conjure the Patronus to save the non-time-traveling versions of himself, Hermione, and Sirius. We can think of these 2 Harrys coming together to form the figure on the World card, armed with 2 wands, and surrounded by symbols of wholeness and completion, the epitome of the spiritual wholeness necessary to conjure a Patronus. Harry begins to take divination as a subject in his 3rd year at school in Prisoner of Azkaban. While the first book had an oblique connection to the Wheel of Fortune card, number 10, which is numerically related to card number 1, the Magician, the card at the top of the first column of cards, the column linked to Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, this is the first book in which the Wheel of Fortune is a column card, one of the main cards linked to the themes of the book. It's in the middle of the 3rd column, between the Empress card and the Star card. There are many versions of the wheel card, but just about all of them show a wheel going round, taking 2 or more creatures who are attached to it either up or down, depending on your perspective. The wheel is usually ruled over by a sphinx, a mythical composite creature, a type of tetramorph made of the symbols for the evangelists, a human, a lion, an eagle, and a bull. Some Wheel of Fortune cards have these symbols in the corners of the card, which again links the card to fire, air, water, and earth, and thus again to the Tarot Minor Arcana suits also linked to these elements, and to the Hogwarts houses, as I talked about in episode 18, The Wide World. The symbols for the suits of the Tarot Minor Arcana are also on the Magician card, number 1, which is of course linked to card number 10, and the symbols for the Evangelists are also in the corners of the World card, number 21, which I just talked about because it's linked to the Empress at the top of the column for this book. Instead of the symbols for the Evangelists, some versions of the wheel have the alchemical symbols for fire, air, water, and earth somewhere on the card. But both the elemental symbols and the angel, lion, eagle, and bull are collectively one symbol of wholeness. On many, if not most, wheel cards, letters have been drawn on the wheel. When this occurs, it's usually 4 Roman letters alternating with 4 Hebrew letters. The Roman letters can spell T-A-R-O, which is basically tarot without the final T. Or we can think of them as R-O-T-A, rota, which is the Latin word for wheel. The Hebrew letters on the wheel are Yod or Yod, Y-O-D-H when transliterated into Roman letters, He, H-E, Vav, V-A-V, or sometimes transliterated W-A-W, and again, He, H-E, which is the tetragrammaton, a word that just means 4 letters in Greek. This is derived from a Hebrew verb meaning to be, and it's considered to be the proper name of God, I am that I am, or I am becoming that I am becoming. This 4-letter Hebrew word is not usually actually pronounced in Hebrew. When people encounter it, they generally say Hashem, which just means the name. It's variously been pronounced by others as Yahweh, Yehovah, or Jehovah, among other things, down through the years, when it was considered appropriate to pronounce it at all. And of course, not everyone agrees on if or when it was appropriate to do so. But this is where those words for God come from. They come from the tetragrammaton, the 4 letters, Hashem, the name. So I've said that the figures on the wheel, which faintly resembles a Ferris wheel, are going up and down. In addition to the Wheel of Fortune card being especially appropriate in the book where Harry begins the study of divination, Harry's fortunes also rise and fall in this book in a dizzying progression. He's down when he's with Aunt Marge. He's on the upswing when he has the pleasure of seeing her inflated. He's down again when he runs away. But his luck is on the rise when he summons the night bus. He's afraid that he'll be expelled for inflating Marge, but he's instead brought under the protection of the Ministry of Magic and allowed to stay in Diagon Alley for the rest of the summer holiday. The wheel can also apply to the Prisoner of Azkaban himself, Sirius Black, who's one of Harry's doppelgangers in the 3rd book. They're both prisoners at the beginning of the book, Sirius in Azkaban and Harry on Privet Drive. They both break free at about the same time, and they're simultaneously on the run. Harry also gives Stan Shunpike, the conductor on the night bus, a false name, Neville Longbottom, which is something a fugitive might do. When it looks bleakest for Sirius and for Buckbeak, Harry saves them both, thanks to the Time Turner, which in its turning evokes the image of a wheel. J.K. Rowling's theory of time travel in this book, though it isn't hers alone, is also wheel-like, requiring time travelers to only walk through the time to which they've traveled and come full circle back to the present, not necessarily having changed anything, but with a different perspective on past events, perhaps better understanding how and why those events unfolded the way that they did. It's strongly implied in the text that Dumbledore has an epiphany about Buckbeak's so-called disappearance before his scheduled execution, and this seems to be why he tells Harry and Hermione to use the Time Turner. Dumbledore seems to already suspect that this is how Buckbeak was saved, and so when he tells them to use the Time Turner, the goal now is to fulfill the timeline that's already occurred, not to change anything. This makes Dumbledore, the archetypal magician, which is numerically linked to the wheel card, crucial to the climax of the book. The other card linked to the magician and to the Wheel of Fortune is the Sun, card number 19, which is linked to both death and resurrection, because the sun sets each evening and then rises again the next day. Harry, Ron, and Hermione believe incorrectly that Buckbeak was executed, so when Harry and Hermione time travel and find that they have the opportunity to rescue him, to them it's as if Buckbeak has been resurrected. And remember, Harry also believes that he sees his own dead father conjure a Patronus to save him, which is another virtual resurrection, until Harry realizes that he did it. I talked earlier about how the Hanged Man card, or Il Traditore, the traitor, could have one of two connotations in this book, or it could have both, referring to those merely considered traitors or opponents of the state, as Harry and Sirius are at various times, or to an actual traitor, Peter Pettigrew. However, there's another card connected to this book that can also refer to traitors. Card number 17 at the bottom of the third column, the Star. One of the best-known stars in myth and folklore is the Morning Star, Lucifer, who was a traitor to heaven. The traitor to Harry's parents, Peter, aka Wormtail, is unveiled in the third book of the series after having lived with the Weasley family for many years, first as Percy's pet and then as Ron's. Sirius's given name is the same as the Dog Star, another quite famous star, which made a lot of readers kind of groan when they realized what J.K. Rowling was doing with the names in this book, calling a black dog animagus Sirius Black, although possibly less than when readers found out that the character called Remus Lupin was an actual werewolf. So once again, we have a card that could refer to traitors and refer to two characters, Sirius, thought to be a traitor, and Peter, the one who really was a traitor. It's as if Peter and Sirius are tethered to opposite sides of the Wheel of Fortune. Peter goes from being protected, hiding in his rat form, his true identity unknown, to being on the run, and being known to Harry and his allies as the real traitor. While Sirius goes from being considered possibly the biggest traitor the wizarding world has ever known, and a fugitive on the run, to having his name cleared, at least as far as Harry's concerned, who actually rescues Sirius. Plus, according to Trelawney's new prophecy, the one she gives to Harry while he's taking his divination final, Peter's probably the one who will help Voldemort to rise again. So he'll have an opportunity to again betray Harry, and betray Ron too, really, since we can consider him to be a member of the Weasley family for the last 12 years, and to also be betraying them by helping Harry's enemy. On many star cards, a woman holds pitchers in each hand and pours liquid from one of the pitchers into a pool of water and from the other pitcher onto the land beside her. There are 8 stars in the sky above the woman, and the stars have 8 points each. The star is the 17th card in the Tarot Major Arcana, and 1 + 7 is 8, which is the number of the Justice card, the card numerically linked to the star card. 8 is a very balanced number, and the equal treatment of the liquid being poured into water and onto land makes this card about balance again, like the Justice card, which shows a woman holding the scales of justice, and which is also a sequential card for this book, as I'll talk about in more detail in the next episode. The number 17 is also important in the Potterverse. It's the age when wizards are considered to be adults, the time when young magical people must decide who they really are. They must find a guiding star, if you will, and forge ahead into their futures. Another interpretation of the star card is that the protagonist of the tarot story has now stopped clinging to traumatic memories through discovering who they really are as a person. There could not be a much better description of Harry being tempted to continue hearing his parents' voices when he's near a Dementor, but later learning to resist this temptation and trusting in his ability to conjure a Patronus, particularly when he realizes that he's the one who already did this, not his miraculously resurrected father. The star card can also point to a generous spirit, someone who shares bounty to improve others' lives. Sirius, which is again the name of a star, offers Harry a home at the end of the third book, even though in the short term he has to settle for signing Harry's permission form to enter Hogsmeade, since he's still a wanted man and on the run from the Ministry of Magic. This is still an offer he makes to Harry, and he's able to make it to Dumbledore as well, giving him number 12 Grimmauld Place to use as the headquarters for the Order of the Phoenix in the 5th book. The star, card number 17, at the bottom of the third column of Tarot Major Arcana cards, points to Harry leaving behind the temptation to wallow in his parents' deaths, to continue to hear their last words, and instead he's given a new family, Sirius, just as Sirius was given the Potters as his new family when he left home as a teenager. Harry discovers the truth about his godfather, and that he, Harry, not his father James, conjured the Patronus that saved him, Hermione, and Sirius. In so doing, Harry takes another step on the path to wholeness. You've been listening to Quantum Harry the Podcast, a podcast version of the book Quantum Harry, A Unified Theory of the Potterverse by B.L. Purdom. All music heard on Quantum Harry is composed and performed by B.L. Purdom. Whether you are streaming on iTunes, Stitcher, CastBox, or another podcatcher, please leave a rating and/or a comment and share episodes of Quantum Harry with your friends. Next time on Quantum Harry, episode 36, Chariots of Justice, the conclusion of a 2-episode arc about tarot symbolism and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, including an examination of how the Tarot Major Arcana cards linked to this book help to illuminate the link between the Horcrux aligned with this book and the DADA teacher in this book, Remus Lupin. I hope you'll join me.